What's going on, sports card hobby friends? Back again, another sports card video. We got two topics today. I watched the first two episodes of the King of Collectibles featuring Ken Golden and his team. We're going to talk about the good and the bad and some interesting takeaways I had from those first two episodes. It'll be part one of two after I watch the rest of season 2. And then also I've been seeing some different kind of complaining going on about the national dealers not being able to get tables the same way that they have in years past. So we will address both of these topics when we come back. Huge shouts to our friends over at Pristine Auctions. And one thing I really enjoy about Pristine is you've got weekly auctions, daily auctions, 10-minute auctions, where items pop up. Literally, they're being auctioned off 10-minute blocks. Actually really fun. Last week, I bought a few items. Drago trunks signed by Dolph Lundgren, Taylor Swift signed guitar, and also Mike Tyson signed gloves. Variety of things last week from my kids. The Drago trunks were from me, of course. Sports Card Dad code gives you $10 off of your first auction win. There will be a link down below in the video description, as well as in the pinned comments to take you there to get the party started. All right, Ken Golden and his team back again. Season 2 of King of Collectibles is now on Netflix. I enjoyed the first two episodes, but some interesting takeaways that I had. First off, heavy focus on pop culture items, not as much on the sports side, which I thought was interesting. So pop culture plus historical docs and autographs. He brought in an expert to talk about some of that stuff, which was cool. But a lot of those first two episodes, Pablo Escobar signed a book, huge video game collector, which I thought was cool. I also collect sealed and CIB video games, graded games. JFK autographed donkey stuffed animal thing, which was cool, kind of going back to when JFK was running for president. An Eminem signed first album, actually an album I never even knew existed. Shout out to AMG Robbie, who I met at the last Culture Collision show going back a few months. He was in the show, and he was the one that ended up consigning the Eminem signed first album over to Golden, but good to see him there. Shout out, Robbie. But really on the sports side, they had a Jason Dominguez home run ball, which that was a cool story. And then they had a Wemby 1-of-1 auto card that was pulled from a guy in Germany that they flew in and talked to. And that was cool as well. But on the sports card side, the show does open up with a monster, maybe the big monster. It's a T206 Honus Wagner. Funny, sitting in an SGC 5 case. And everyone, I know, it's the PSA versus the SGC thing. Our friends at SGC have monstrous cards in their holders, in the Tux holder. So again, here, they're getting great visibility here on the King of Collectibles Season 2, where they do talk about the grading company, talk about SGC, and so they're getting a boost there, I'm sure, but it's an SGC 5, one of the highest graded examples that is known. Of course, Ken wants the card. There's a big back and forth. I don't want to spoil what actually happens, but Ken walks into the guy's office and puts a lot of cash on the table as kind of an upfront advance for the card, and I won't spoil the rest, but that was from a sports card side in the first two episodes. Outside of the Dominguez and the Wemby card, that was the big monster that they kind of rolled out to open the show, and it's a huge one. One thing kudos I will give is the sales team for both. Now, granted, it could have just been a sales pitch to get that consignment in and get it sold. That's fine, but I thought that it was also pretty decent advice. For the Jason Dominguez home run ball, and again, this is going back when they filmed it, probably when Dominguez was still kind of doing his thing before injury, I'm assuming here. They filmed this a while ago, and now it's finally coming out. So you've got the Jason Dominguez first home run ball in Yankee Stadium, and the Wemby 1-of-1 auto. They were advising, hey, probably a good idea to sell now, strike while the iron is hot. And they did mention, hey, look, these guys are up-and-coming prospects. As good as they look, this might be the time where you can get the most money for these items, which of course may or may not be true. And they did say that, look, it might be worth this now. They could falter, it could go down, or Jason Dominguez might be the next Yankee Mickey Mantle. Who knows how that's going to go. Nobody knows how future pricing is going to look, but I thought that was pretty decent advice from their sales team. Now, when we go to the pop culture items and the heavy focus I saw on the first couple of episodes here, one thing that kind of stuck out to me, and again, this could have been lost in the editing. So it didn't seem like those guys really had a good handle. And I'm talking specifically about the video game collection. Basically, the storyline is one of the sales guys was like, hey, you know what? This guy's been buying a lot of video games from us, been buying different pop culture things from us. Why don't I go in, visit him, and see if he might have some things to sell? And of course, he did end up having some very cool items to sell on the video game side. But unless it hit the cutting room floor, it didn't seem like those guys really had a good handle on what he had. They were, of course, doing the oohs and ahs like you would as a salesperson. And of course, look, any of us that are in collectibles, whether you collect that thing or know about that thing, if you see someone's got a massive collection, you think, man, this is really cool. And then the other guy was kind of like, oh, there's $1 million in this room. I understand the thought process of you're looking to sell these items. It's your job to consign and sell. I get that. But really kind of knowing what that guy had, I think if there was other salespeople that are more refined in that area, that really know that stuff, that can look at a game and understand the difference between first print and fourth print Super Mario Brothers NES, knowing the difference between a 3-screw and a 5-screw cartridge, I feel like there probably would have been more of a connection. Now, they did get the consignment, but that's one video game collector of many, many, many out there. And I just feel like people coming in from an auction house that want your items, ideally, you want them to really know your stuff, or I think that would go a long way. It would for me. If I was someone that had the video game collection that guy had, and somebody walked in and was like, oh man, you've got this XYZ game. I remember that game when it came out, and I do know this is a rare variant of that particular game. Right there, it tells that person like, okay, we have a connection here. We're on the same wavelength. The reason why that is important is I'm going to state the obvious here, but it is extremely competitive in this space right now, not just for sports memorabilia stuff, but all this pop culture stuff. If you look at the major auction houses, the ones that I work with, the Robert Edward Auctions, Pristine Auction, Hakes Auctions, these companies are doing very well. They're doing a lot of business, but it is a highly competitive space. Really, the auction house that dominates pop culture is Heritage Auctions. Heritage is really the one that dominates pop culture. One of the companies I work with, Hakes Auctions, in PA, Pennsylvania, one of the older auction houses. They have deep-rooted relationships in these same sorts of political items and pop culture items, go along with sports and that sports memorabilia stuff. But there's already a lot of folks that are diving into pop culture. So the golden name is not going to just get pop culture items in. There's going to have to be some expertise there. And it looks like they're looking to bring that in. That's what I took from the first couple of episodes. Frankly, the content that I really want to see with auction houses, if I'm watching a Netflix style show like this, because it's kind of built like the real estate shows, but even with the real estate shows, and again, I know this is a marketing thing, they don't necessarily want to put their competition in this show. It would be really cool to see some back and forth or some, wins and losses, Golden versus Heritage versus Hakes versus Pristine versus these different companies, and seeing kind of like how realtors are fighting over listings. You have realtors that are out there and they're all meeting with the seller and they're all trying to make their case as to why they should get the listing. And you do have people within your own company that are trying to get listings, but then you also have competing real estate brokerages. Actually, there is a show I believe it was on Netflix, where you did have competing brokers from different brokerages and they cross paths, and there's kind of some drama attached to that. To me, that would be kind of the ultimate show for what I'm looking for in this space. Not that I don't like seeing the items that Golden's got and kind of highlighting certain things. And I do understand that this is trying to appeal to a mainstream audience. But eventually, first season, second season, we're going to get to a point where the mainstream understands it. The mainstream has seen this before. And then how are you going to mix up this show to make it a little different, a little bit more edgy? And that's the way that they can make it a little bit more edgy. Ken Golden battling it out with whoever, a rep at Heritage, a rep at Hakes, a rep at REA, whatever. Whatever that looks like. But I think that would make for more entertainment TV. So just ideas for down the road. My wife and I watch the show Yellowstone, and that's essentially, different sectors warring for land in Montana. You've got the ranchers in Montana, Kevin Costner and his group and his family. They've got hundreds of thousands of acres there in Montana as ranchers. And then you've got the American Indians. They've got their reservation land and they're trying to expand their territory. And then you've got big corporations coming in and they're trying to build golf courses and different things on that land. So you've got these competing these competing houses that are trying to win that land. Kind of like Dune, the movie Dune and Dune 2 that just came out on HBO, where House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Orcos, or all these different houses trying to control the resources, the land, and this is kind of similar in a way. Everyone's trying to control the inventory. Everyone wants all the best collectibles so they can auction them off, sell them off to their buyers, sellers, etc. So to see kind of an extension of this show to include other kind of auction houses as part of it as kind of the behind the scenes war for consignment would be really fun to watch. Outside of that though, I like the presentation. I like to throw in, different funny little clips, and there's good chemistry, camaraderie within their team. And I like that they're showing kind of what's happening with these items and the items that pop up. That's all entertaining stuff. So it's not as if the show's not entertaining on its own. I'm just thinking of how could you change it up, extend this out into a spin-off series or something else. And I assume Ken will probably want as many different shows as he possibly can have on Netflix just to get that exposure. We go back to the competition between these auction houses. Ken just did a deal with eBay essentially, which I assume we're going to kind of see more of the golden auctions listings filtering into eBay, probably in the same way, I guess, to where PWCC was a huge consignor on eBay. I'm assuming that's how it's going to look. Golden auctions that are hitting eBay, maybe they're getting a special designation or something since eBay owns Golden, or has a stake in Golden, whatever it is. I assume that maybe those are sponsored or they're highlighted, within eBay so that okay, that's a golden auction. One thing that eBay's not really as much known for are high-end items. That's more for the Goldens and the Heritages and the Robert Edward auctions and those sorts of places. And so I think eBay would love to have more of that business represented on its site. Ironically, in the last week, what just happened? Of course, Fanatics bought PWCC. It's now going to be Fanatics Collect. And now they've done a deal with Sotheby's so that they can get high-end items in front of the Sotheby's folks. The battle for high-end items has never been more fierce. So good timing for Golden to have season 2 come out. But man, you talk about really having to grind. Now it's going to be a lot harder now that Fanatics and Michael Rubin, the wheels are starting to turn to where what they're going to do with PWCC, it looks like that's going to expand out. I'm curious to see how much focus Michael Rubin puts on that side of his business. He's obviously running a million different things. How much focus is he going to put on getting these sorts of items? Ironically, in the show, in the first 2 episodes, you had a guy, one of the salespeople, made a promise to the consignor that he had to back out of for that one-of-one Wimby. He said, hey, maybe we can put a video together where Wimby is promoting your card. And then it ended up having to meet with Ken, and he had to say, like, hey, I'm sorry that I did that. I overpromised. Ken gave him a pass, like, hey, you do great work here, built him back up. Spoiler alert for the show, by the way, but built him back up. He has to call the consignor and explain and kind of make it right and that sort of thing. But you know who could have gotten Wemby in a promotional video for a huge Wemby card? Michael Rubin could have. Michael Rubin at Fanatics Collect can make that happen. Ken Golden has amazing relationships with longtime athletes. He's shown that with the Peyton Mannings and the Barry Bonds and that sort of thing. Michael Rubin has probably similar relationships with those ex-athletes as well as the new athletes, the folks that are playing now. So that's an interesting dynamic because I think that could be a differentiator for Ken Golden in the past. Hey, I've got relationships with the athletes. I've been doing this for decades, which is all true. But guess what? Michael Rubin, he is the guy now. He is the guy that has those relationships now. So how much is he going to flex that muscle, those relationships, to push down and compete, to make Fanatics Collect kind of that go-to place for high-end items that Golden is really known for? It's going to be interesting to watch because, again, Golden has not necessarily been competing against Michael Rubin up until recently. So we'll see what happens there. That's going to be interesting to watch, these conglomerates going at it, trying to find this business. But like I said, these auction houses, it is a boom time in this space where we're talking about sports memorabilia cards, or we're talking about pop culture items, movie props, all this stuff, music memorabilia. It's all hitting right now. People are spending huge money and really loving it and enjoying it. So it's a great time, I think, for any of these auction houses really doing some good work here. All right, on the back end of this conversation, we're going to talk about the National. A lot of dealers upset, a lot of longtime dealers that have been there forever. They have been able to essentially sublet out tables. We've talked about this in videos past. Ken Sports Card Lessons. I like Ken. I've met him before. And he does a great show. I like Sports Cards Lessons because He's a dealer. He goes to these different shows and he's giving his feedback on what he's seeing out there as far as buying, selling, trading. And it's great feedback because he's out there a lot. He's not going to a couple shows a year. He's probably, I don't know, he's probably going to 10, 15, 20 shows a year. He's doing a lot of shows. And that gives good insight as to what is going on in that world. And so he's not happy because I don't know if it was last year, year before, I don't know how long he's been able to get a table this way, but essentially he's one of these folks that has a connection, that's able to buy a table or two from somebody that, I don't know, maybe it has 5 or 6 tables at the National and they have a couple that they can sublet out, they can sell out to people like Ken. Well, the National this year, under new management, they're cutting all that out. We're not doing that anymore. There's not going to be subletting of tables. They're limiting names on badges so that there's not going to be any sneakiness. And of course, the threats of, hey, look, if you try to skirt the system, you're out. We'll just move somebody else in. And in Ken's video, he kind of wondered, like, what's the motive around this? Why would this happen? And it's pretty simple, is that there's a fairly lengthy wait list to exhibit at the National. It is the Super Bowl of sports card events. That's, of course, why everyone wants to go there and sell. That's why everyone's very happy to be able to get a table in there. It is the Super Bowl of events. Now, many could argue, hey, Fanatics Events is here. They've got 3 shows coming up. Will they compete against the National? Will they draw away from the National? Will they be in addition to the National? Which I think that's probably what it's going to turn into, more of a supplement. All these shows have stayed busy. We're not seeing card shows across the nation that are dead. Maybe we do hit an oversaturation point with these large shows. I mean, I can't do all of it. I can't do the National. I can't do the NYC show. It's 2 weeks after for Fanatics. I then can't go to Pittsburgh. I can't do all of them, so it'll be interesting to see how that does play out, but I actually think that this is a good thing, as much as Ken's not happy about it. If you're somebody that's been on the wait list and you haven't been able to exhibit the National, maybe you've been sitting there for years on the wait list, and part of that is thanks to just tables that are being sold to, someone's buddy, that kind of sucks, does it not? Does it not suck if you're sitting on the wait list waiting and you can't get a table because that space is eaten up by longtime dealers? That, hey, I've got too much space here. They have a surplus of space, so they're able to sell it off to their friends. I mean, come on. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? I mentioned in this video about, is there going to be empty tables at the National? And I guess that will be what's telling. If I walk into that Cleveland, the I-9 Center, the X9 Center, whatever it's called, and there's a bunch of empty space because they didn't let somebody, sublet out, then maybe, yes, there can be a case made like, oh, we're missing out on inventory. We could have had Ken's inventory or whoever is coming in with inventory. But if I walk into Cleveland and it's jam-packed the same way that it always is, then that just tells me that they've got enough people and probably more to fill these spots. Because remember, there's not just a waiting list, there's a lottery system. There's a whole thing about where you're going to get tables. There's a whole process that really hasn't been followed, or they haven't cracked down on it, in years past. They just haven't. So we'll see how it is. It's going to be different this year, and we'll see how it plays out. I happen to think that it's still going to be a busy show. As much as I've talked about, will Fanatics kind of draw away from the National? I do think there's certain people are not going to go, obviously, but I do think there's going to be people that fill those seats, fill those spots. There will be people that don't go this year, and there will be new people that go to Cleveland this year that didn't go last year. I think we underestimate too just how many people are still coming in to this hobby. We assume that everyone came in 2020. And then some have stayed and some have left, but no one else is coming in new. And I see all the time different posts from people, whether it be comment section in my video or others, or in a Facebook group where it's like, hey, I just got into this last month. What do you suggest here or there? There are new people still coming in that might say, oh, cool, Cleveland's in my backyard, or that's a 3-hour drive or whatever. In the Midwest, they can make it happen. So I think we'll just have to see how that plays out. But this isn't some sort of a shock. I don't think it's weird at all that the National is deciding, hey, you know what? We're going to take a little bit more control over this, especially when we have people that have been sitting on our wait list for, years potentially. All right, my friends, that is all that I have got today. A little long-winded today. Thank you very much for joining me. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.